do you think of snakes? For me, not a problem. I quite like them. That is, as long as they're behind thick glass.
On this Japanese island, going to sleep meant gambling with your life. A venomous snake called the habu hunted in the dark, slipped through gaps in wooden walls, and struck 400 people in one terrible year. Desperate and cornered, the people unleashed a creature famous for slaughtering snakes. They believed they had won. 25 years later, the truth behind that decision horrified everyone who heard it. The day the hunt finally ended. On the 3rd of September in 2024, officials from Japan's Ministry of the Environment stood up and said something nobody believed they would ever say. The mongoose was gone, completely gone. Wiped from the entire island of Amami Oshima, every single one of them, after a war that had lasted almost a quarter of a century. You have to understand how impossible this sounded. This was not some tiny rock in the ocean. Amami Oshima is over 700 square kilometers of mountains, thick forest, and hidden caves, and it is more than 600 times bigger than any place a mongoose had ever been removed from. Before. The experts who track these things around the world called it a miracle, and they did not use that word lightly. One scientist who spent 15 years building the math behind the decision said he felt the weight of it crushing him, because his numbers alone would decide whether this entire mission was declared finished or not. But here is the part that stays with me. The reason they were celebrating an empty forest was because of what had filled that forest before. And to understand the joy, you first have to understand the horror that came before it. A genius idea that made perfect sense. Back in 1979, the people of this island were not foolish. They were terrified, and they were thinking clearly. The habu was destroying lives, and the medicine to treat its bite was a liquid that needed to be kept cold. Out in those rural villages, there was no electricity, no refrigeration, and no easy way to store anything that could save a dying person in time. So when someone suggested bringing in the mongoose, it sounded like the smartest plan anyone had ever heard. This was the famous snake killer, the little warrior from the old stories that could take on a cobra and walk away alive. It was cheap. It needed no power lines and no machines. It would breed on its own, hunt on its own, and solve the problem forever, while everyone slept peacefully. Around 30 of them were released into the wild, and the whole island exhaled with relief. For a brief moment, it truly felt like humans had outsmarted nature. They had found the one creature evolution had built specifically to kill the thing they feared most. What none of them realized was that they had just handed a loaded weapon to an animal that had absolutely no interest in pulling the trigger they wanted. The killer that refused to kill. Nature has a cruel sense of humor, and it revealed the joke slowly. The mongoose hunts during the day. The habu hunts at night. These two creatures, the predator and the prey, were almost never awake at the same time. They passed each other like ghosts, one sleeping while the other roamed, and the great battle everyone imagined simply never happened. The little warrior had been given a job, and it politely ignored that job to go and do whatever it wanted instead. The snakes carried on as before, and meanwhile, something far more precious was about to start vanishing from the forest, something that could never be replaced once it was gone. There is a rabbit that lives only here, on this island, and one neighbor beside it, and nowhere else on the entire planet. Scientists call it a living fossil because it is the last survivor of an ancient line of rabbits that walked the earth millions of years ago. It has small ears and dark fur, and a mother of this species does something heartbreakingly gentle. She nurses her babies in a separate den, then seals the entrance with soil to hide them, and she only returns once every 2 days to feed them. This rabbit had survived for an unimaginably long time because nothing on the island hunted it like this. It had no defense against a fast, clever, hungry predator because it had never needed one. So when the mongoose population exploded to 10,000 strong by the year 2000, these rabbits started dying in numbers the island had never witnessed. And it was not just the rabbit. Around 15 species found only in this part of the world were pushed toward the edge of extinction. Frogs that sang in choirs so loud they filled the whole valley fell quiet. Rare birds, ancient rats, creatures that existed in no other corner of Earth, all of them began slipping away. The island was watching its own irreplaceable treasures get eaten alive, and somebody finally decided that enough was enough. The people who fought back. This is where the real heroes walk into the story, and they are not who you would expect. They were ordinary local people. They became known as the Mongoose Busters, and they started as a small group of around 12, eventually growing to nearly 50 determined souls. Their work was brutal and boring and endless all at once. They hiked up steep mountains and through tangled forest every single day, setting and checking thousands of traps, sometimes 60 in a day, walking the same exhausting lines over and over. One man who joined came all the way from another part of Japan, and he said the responsibility belonged to the humans who brought the mongoose here in the first place, so it was their duty to fix it. A veteran trapper admitted that in the early days he could catch over 100 in a single month, but as the years passed, even he, a master at this, struggled to find a single one. They brought in special dogs trained to sniff out mongooses hiding in their dens. They built clever traps shaped so that the rare native rats would not get hurt by accident. They smoked the animals out of rock crevices where no human hand could reach. Lots of money, lots of sweat, and countless lonely hours in the wilderness, all spent chasing an enemy that bred faster than they could ever hope to catch it. And then one day, something changed that nobody could quite believe at first, proving that nothing was there. The traps stopped catching anything. The last mongoose was caught in April of 2018, and after that, nothing. No animals in the traps, no faces on the hidden cameras, no scent for the dogs to follow. Just silence, month after month, year after year. But here is the genuinely difficult part, and it is more fascinating than it sounds. How do you prove that something does not exist anymore? You cannot search every cave and every burrow on a massive island and guarantee you missed nothing. So the scientists built two separate mathematical models, fed them more than 20 years of hard-earned data, and asked the machines to calculate the odds. The answer came back at over 99% certainty that not one mongoose remained alive on the island. For 6 straight years, they watched, waited, and monitored, refusing to declare victory until they were almost completely sure. That patience, that refusal to celebrate too early, is exactly why this story ended in triumph instead of tragedy. And it is a triumph that another Japanese island is watching very closely right now, because their own nightmare is far from over. The war that is still being fought. Just south of here sits Okinawa, and the mongoose arrived there even earlier, around the year 1910. The climate is warmer and friendlier to these animals, so they breed faster and survive better, which makes them so much harder to remove. 3 more bird species that live nowhere else on Earth are hanging in the balance, depending entirely on whether people can repeat the umami miracle before it is too late. The world has seen this exact mistake before and lost. In Jamaica and in Hawaii, mongooses were released over 100 years ago to kill rats, and in both places they ignored the rats and devoured the native wildlife instead. Those islands missed their chance to act, and they are still paying for it today. What Amami Oshima proved is that you can win, but only if you move fast and never give up, because the moment you stop fighting, the darkness comes creeping back in. What do you think about a choice like this, where good intentions led to such a heavy price, and would you have made the same call? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments below.